On this episode of Personal, we're speaking to Angela Davies, co-founder of CSI Training and Events. Just a reminder of the 4 rules on the Personal podcast, where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. Number 1, no business questions, only personal. We might touch on business, but the whole point is keeping it personal. No small talk, we'll save that for networking. Honest answers only, and don't forget, anything I ask you, I'm happy to answer as well. So feel free to flip the question back to me.
Fantastic.
Great. So let's get started. Angela, what's the most shocking thing that you saw when you worked as a CSI in the police?
Okay, most shocking thing that we saw there's lots of different cases, and I think different things affect people differently. And often people think it'll be kind of the most gruesome thing that shocks you or stays with you. But it can be just the small things. But for me, I think the overall thing was just how we treat others as humans, just how humans can treat each other and be so violent towards each other and so inconsiderate of other people, really. Some of the things you see in terms of humanity I found quite shocking.
Oh, that would really bother me. How did you manage to cope with that?
I think that you've figured different coping mechanisms. So talking to your colleagues is a good one because they're going through the same things you are. They're seeing the same kind of things you are. The police these days are getting much better, I think, at referring people to mental health services if they've been working in shocking cases. That wasn't the case when I was there, but you could refer to occupational health to speak to somebody if you wanted to. But I think also having quite a warped sense of humour and you share it with the people that do something similar because you often have a dark sense of humour and you need a certain kind of personality. And also to be able to detach in some ways. Because if you were to take it home with you, you'd probably drive yourself a bit crazy, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. And I did actually wonder, how did you sleep at night when you did that job?
Quite well. Is that terrible?
No.
Usually, if you've done a really long day's work and you've done a 10, 12-hour shift, by the time you get home, you're so tired. You're glad that,
it doesn't matter what you've seen.
Yeah. Of course, some things keep you awake or some things bother you for a lot longer. So for me, there are cases, because it's been a while since I left that role, and for me, there are still some cases that have stayed with me that I talk about whenever Dee and I are kind of running events or if we're doing some training, the cases that I refer back to. So one of the ones was one of the last murders that I worked on, and I was part of the team that conducted the post-mortem. And it was the murder of an elderly lady who had over 100 injuries, and she'd been beaten to death with a claw hammer. So that for me was quite shocking. I also remember a burglary that I once went to, and the guy, he was blind. When I got there, the people that had been in and burgled him, he was in the house, and they must have realised that he was blind, and they moved all of his things around. So not only did they steal from him, they moved his things around so he couldn't get his bearings in his own home. And that for me that's something that stays with me. Things like that are shocking. If it's not bad enough you're burgling, then you've got to then kind of torture this poor soul in some way. Like, why? Yeah, so things like that. So there are shocking, like I say, individual cases, but overall it's just how we behave towards each other sometimes as humans. And
did it ever make you despair in humanity?
Sometimes, yes. And sometimes I realised after I left the police that I'd become a little bit cynical as well, which is not really a great thing. So sometimes you become a bit cynical and maybe a little bit judgmental. And I didn't like that about myself. It's something that I've worked on after leaving the police, because I think you've got to take every case and everybody you meet kind of as you find. You never know what's going on in people's lives.
Absolutely. I know. So how did you work on yourself in that respect?
I think it's just being a little bit more self-aware. And when you're kind of going down that path, stop and check and take a minute and pause, you know.
I think good lessons for life no matter what.
Yeah, definitely. And try and keep an open mind. It was something that I advocated as a scene investigator, to try and keep an open mind. And I did it at every case I went to. As a scene investigator, I was very good at having an open mind and taking it on a case-by-case basis, because it is so important. It's funny because you get cases where you see the same kind of thing coming through all the time, and sometimes the same people, and that's where the cynicism, I think, creeps in. And you do have to pause and think, okay, this is a fresh day, this is a fresh case.
Oh, that must be hard. Yeah, I think I'd struggle with that. If it's the same person all the time, you would instantly want to judge them how they behaved in the past.
Yeah, it can be difficult.
Wow. And so you've mentioned about some of the ones that you found personally difficult. What was the most gruesome?
The most gruesome, I think, was the elderly lady that I told you about had been murdered with a claw hammer. I think that was definitely the most gruesome one for me. And you see some weird things as well. I once saw a woman had unfortunately decided to take her own life, but she also decided to take her dog as well with her, and they were kind of together back to back, and it was very, very strange. You see some, weird and wonderful things.
Oh my goodness. That's horrific. I think that will stay with me, I think.
Sorry. Edited it out. I don't want to terrify
No,
people.
I asked the question. I asked the question. And, that is one thing that, I don't know, about the human mind. We like to hear these gruesome tales, like the crime dramas are often the best performing shows on Netflix or any TV channel. Yeah,
it's true. Reality, in particular crime TV, people really seem to love and enjoy. And it's no business talk, but we have created events around it, and people love it and find it fascinating. And still to this day, people find it fascinating. And I still love crime scene and forensic investigation. It's not something that has left me just because I'm not working in that role in the police anymore. I still find it fascinating. I think it's that thing, isn't it? When you're driving down the road and you see a road traffic accident, a lot of people want to stop and stare, doesn't it? To stop and take a look. It's just human nature, I think, to focus on some of the gruesome sometimes.
I know, even though it's quite unhealthy and bad. But you must have felt that you're helping when you were working in that role as well.
I did. For me, it was really rewarding. It's one of the reasons that I did it and wanted to do it. I wanted to help victims of crime, and when you would find a key piece of evidence that would identify a suspect, and hopefully you'd get some justice for someone that had been treated with such injustice or in such a poor way, then that felt really rewarding. That was a good feeling, I have to say.
Oh, I bet.
And also helping victims of crime, because you deal with them on a daily basis, and sometimes they're at the worst and most vulnerable points. So someone that's just been burgled is probably at one of the most vulnerable points because somebody's been in their home and invaded their space. You go in and you're there to do a job and process the scene and recover as much evidence as possible. But, you're human too, and it's having that empathy and trying to help the victim as best as they can feel a little bit more comfortable in their own home, and maybe giving them some crime prevention advice. Again, it's just that humanity side, that having empathy and being kind.
Oh, definitely. I think that's so valuable. And maybe this is a sexist question, but did you feel you were able to help a little bit more than perhaps a man in the same role in terms of that empathy to the homeowner, for instance?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It used to be a really male-dominated environment, crime scene investigation and policing in general. When I entered into the force, there was a lot more women coming through, which was really great. And I think actually now it is much more female-dominated. I think or at least it's more balanced, but there's definitely more women in the arena, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Always a great thing. So I don't know, it's a tricky one to answer that.
It is good to have a balance, though. I definitely think. I'm not saying, there should just be all women at all, because it's good to have a balance.
Definitely.
But I just know that in conversations I've had in the workplace, they've often found that women have shown more empathy in certain situations. So I just thought it was worth asking the question. Okay, so what was the worst thing about the role?
I would say, like, working in a lot of big organisations, management, red tape and bureaucracy. Things that I do not miss.
Was that one of the reasons why you wanted to leave in the end?
Yes, yeah, most definitely. Well, one of the reasons that was left was because they were making job cuts, they were making redundancies. It was at the time when the new government came in and they were slashing public services. Right. And it was really interesting because they brought in an outside agency to make an assessment to decide on the cuts and the budget cuts. And I think they deemed that our department was not public facing and that we didn't deal with people or the public face to face enough. So they decided to slash the department by 50%. At this point, I'd actually had enough, to be honest, anyway. because of the bureaucracy and management and red tape. And they were changing the working hours that weren't going to be as great. They were cutting the pay, not all the kind of shift allowances. They were cutting supervisor positions, so there was no real career progression. They were cutting specialist training. And I knew that I could stay and it'd probably come back round in a cycle, because it always does, and things would change because they always do in these places. But I was at a place where I was already at the top of the pay grade with very little place to go and not thoroughly enjoying working in the department. So for me, I decided to take the redundancy and move forward with the business. It was quite an easy decision for me. I do wish a little bit that I'd worked in maybe one or two other forces just to see what it was like, explore a little bit, but I didn't. So
oh, but fantastic. I bet you make a really good dinner party guest for all your stories.
Yeah, well, it depends what you want from a dinner party. If you want some of them to be throwing up, then yeah,
that's true. Good point. And actually, on that subject of throwing up, I've still got another question about when I first met you, years ago. I think we were both kind of setting up our businesses.
Yeah.
Another thing that kind of stuck with me was that you mentioned the smells on some of the crime scenes. Can you go into that a little bit?
It's the worst. It's really interesting. You get tips and techniques. So I think decomposing dead bodies are often the worst, and people struggle with them, and post-mortems as well. But there's a trick. You just basically inhale and breathe it in. And once you've got it into your lungs and your system, you stop smelling it so much. But there are a couple of things that have made me gag a little bit. But funnily enough, one of the worst things was greasy egg. So I went to the scene of a stabbing where a partner had stabbed his pregnant girlfriend, and there was a lot of blood and blood clotting around. They'd been removed. He'd been arrested, and the partner was at the hospital. But they'd been making breakfast, and it wasn't the most cleanly of places. It wasn't very nice, but they had solidified fat and grease in a pan and eggs, but it was really still, and it had been there for days. And I just, bizarrely, I couldn't bear it.
You were fine sick with the blood.
The blood and the blood clots and all that kind of thing. Absolutely fine, but the greasy eggs were just awful. And actually, I remember one smell that'll stay with me for some time. It put me off food. We went to attend a post-mortem of a guy who'd been sadly run over. It was a hit and run, and in post-mortems they take your stomach contents, and he'd been out with the lads and he'd had beer and curry, and it was awful. It put me off curry for quite some time, actually.
Oh my goodness. Honest. Yeah, and do you still eat eggs as well now?
Oh yeah, I love eggs. I do. Just don't fry them like that. Don't leave them sat around or solidifying.
Oh my goodness. So did you have to look at the contents of his stomach?
No. It's just there as part of the sampling team to help recover and record.
Okay.
A forensic pathologist is the one that kind of opens up a body for analysis and does a lot of dissection and then sends the sample off for analysis.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you obviously know what post-mortem is, but you don't think about the detail.
No, people don't. I actually really loved them. I know that sounds awful because it means somebody's died, but I always found them really fascinating. I find the human body fascinating.
Oh, me too.
I think it's an incredible thing. Some of the things that it lives through, some of the traumas that we survive and cope with, and the way that it adapts and changes is amazing. And then in post-mortem, in death, the things that it can tell us about what's happened, I always find absolutely amazing. And I remember going to one post-mortem where a guy, he'd been really unfortunate. It was an accident at work, and he got crushed by a Manitou truck. And he survived. And he was in hospital, and he'd done really well. He managed to get home, and they'd adapted his premises. But unfortunately, when he got home, he died from a blood clot coming loose, and it killed him instantly. So he'd gone through all of that, and he'd survived the trauma, and then unfortunately died from a blood clot. But what was fascinating is the pathologist that we were working with. She was great. Some of the pathologists are really brilliant. You know, if you're interested and want to learn, they're happy to show you. So I was always in there asking questions because I'm a bit nosy. And we actually managed to trace the blood clot from his leg all the way up and into his lungs. But it was so long and huge, and the path it took was just incredible. So I always found it really fascinating.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. And just for anyone listening who's thinking, what an amazing career, what's the route you go through to get that? Is it more kind of the medical biology, or is it through the police, or both?
To be a forensic pathologist, it's the medical route. So you have to be a doctor first and then train to be a pathologist.
Okay.
And then I think that there's more years on top than to be a forensic pathologist. To be a crime scene investigator, you go to postmortems as a crime scene investigator. You're not handling the body, you're there taking photographs, taking samples and recording what happens and working with the pathologist and the other team, other parts of the team, such as I'm sorry, my brain's just gone dead.
It's okay, mine does that all the time.
The mortuary technician.
Oh, yeah.
Such as the mortuary technician and other police that may be there from different kind of departments. So it might be a senior investigating officer if it's a murder, for example. So to be a crime, I've just gone completely off track.
No, it's fine. No, I was just asking about careers and, how you got through, whether it was police or the...
Yeah, so to be a crime scene investigator, I went to university, actually, here at Teesside, and every force is different. It's really difficult to say because they change their entry levels and entry points. So some forces do look for degrees. Others have actually just started. There's 2 or 3 in the country now that are doing the apprenticeship route.
Oh, brilliant.
So you don't even have to go through university, which is a great thing, I think, because the job, it requires a lot of common sense and practical skills. You don't have to be a high achiever in academia to be a crime scene investigator.
Yeah.
It takes much more of those everyday skills, I think.
And resilience, I'd have thought. And
yeah, a lot of resilience, methodical and logical thinking, analytical, being a bit nosy, being very practical, being able to work in a very practical manner. And you do need to know and understand the science behind what you're doing and why you're doing it. That is true. And the more you know and understand, I think the better it is and the better investigator it makes you. But you can learn all of that as you're going. So yeah, a few forces doing the apprenticeship routes and a few would take people on now, I think, from college. And others are still looking for degree route. So it is very different nationally, force by force. So I often tell people to just keep looking at all the forces up and down the country. We've got 43 forces in England and Wales. So
yeah, lots of opportunity, hopefully.
Keep looking, keep applying, and also applying for jobs around it that'll give you experience but get you a foot in the door. So there's lots of different things that can be done.
Yeah, and we talked about some of those reality crime or crime dramas. Do you think that's leading to a surge in that career? And how accurate are the TV dramas?
It did. I remember back, probably when I was in force after my degree, around about that time, CSI Miami and CSI New York, all of those things were out. And it led to something called the... sorry, my brain's gone dead again.
That's okay.
Led to... What was it called? I think it was called the forensic effect.
Okay, right,
where a lot of people, there was a surge in interest in it and people wanting to do it. There's also a surge in victims kind of telling you how to do your job as well. Yeah, but there's been a lot of study done on that. There's been research actually done on the forensic effect from these TV shows and reality shows. And the truth is, the TV shows are nothing like reality. I mean, I think it's on the BBC. Currently, there's the real CSI, and they're following crime scene investigators around in the police force, so that is real. But the CSI New York, CSI Miami, and those kind of things, they're a million miles away from reality.
It's funny, though, that people are telling you how to do your job
it used
from
to
them.
happen a lot.
Oh, I bet that was so frustrating.
It really was, yeah.
And we've talked a little bit about the mortuary and death and postmortems. Has anything paranormal ever happened?
I wouldn't say paranormal. I think that your mind, your brain, is a really amazing tool, but it also has the power to play tricks on you as well. So a couple of times things have happened to me, and not just at scenes, actually. I remember after my nana died also, I'd be driving along in my car, particularly at night, and I'd look up in my rear view and I'd think I'd see somebody in the back, and I'd kind of jump and then check, and nobody was there. So I don't know if it's really paranormal or my brain playing tricks on me, or I'm not sure.
So you're quite cynical about that as well?
No, I think that I would like it to be real. I believe that there's got to be more than just this. I believe in energies and transfer of energy. I think that when we die, we leave behind a shell. I've seen lots of it. And I remember I saw my granddad in the place of rest when I was really quite young. And that was the first time that I realised that when your soul goes, that's the person going, and what's left behind is a shell. Because I remember looking and thinking, that's not my granddad. His body's there, but that's not my granddad, you know? So, yeah, I'm not cynical. I do believe. I just don't know what.
Yeah.
And I think I'd like some hard evidence or something really spooky to happen to me. I'd welcome it, but it would need to be hard evidence. And that's probably the investigator and scientific mindset in me, you know?
Absolutely. And I totally understand where you're going with it. You know, I think maybe I believe a little bit more than you, but I always question it. But unlike you, I'm like, I don't need to see hard evidence. You know? Stop these spooky occurrences. It's fine. But interesting about you'd seen that the soul had gone. I really believe that we have a soul for whatever reason. Again, I don't have as much evidence, but on some of the crime scenes, I know you didn't know the person before, but could you almost tell if the soul was still there or it was gone? It depending how early you got there. A weird question, maybe no answer, but
I don't know if I would have ever thought of it as someone's soul being there. There were some occasions where I would feel, I don't know about other investigators, I think I'm a bit strange at admitting this, owning this, but I would feel maybe an energy, or sometimes you'd get, goosebumps. Whether that was somebody's soul or not, I don't know. But yeah, I would certainly feel an energy, or the hairs on the back of your neck go up, or on your arms. And again, probably my scientific mind would take over, and I'd be thinking, it's just because this is a bit of a creepy situation that we're in, this is a bit of a strange situation, but who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I totally believe it, though. It's because other times you'd be on a site and there'd be nothing, or certainly for me.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah, other times there'd be nothing.
Yeah, sometimes I just get feelings. I was chatting to a friend about it the other day, and she's like, I get vibes, total spooky vibes, and it's just like presences, but you can't explain it, and you've got no evidence to give to anyone. But then equally, you would have never have thought about it if it hadn't happened. It would have just been going about your day-to-day business.
That's true. So do you believe in an afterlife then? Or
I think I do. Again, I'm not sure. I'm still trying to figure it out. It's questions I ask myself every day. But I read a lot of books about it as well, just trying to figure that out. And some part of my brain, and I don't know why, I was just born believing in reincarnation.
Oh, really?
I don't know why, but maybe, again, it's that energy transfer. I definitely believe in it. Well, that's science, isn't it? That's proven physics.
Yes.
And then I do believe in a soul, but I have no concrete evidence. I guess the one thing that I always think of, and I might articulate this wrongly or not the best way, but almost like the hardware, like your telephone, for example, your mobile phone, that is the body, and it's the signal input that creates that soul. Where or however this signal's where it's coming from, I don't know. I haven't figured that out, but you have to be able to receive it. And I think that's the life. You're able to receive that signal, or those transmissions into who you are. That's your soul. However, if that receiver's broken, you can't receive it then. It doesn't mean the signals aren't still transmitting somewhere, and they're perhaps looking for another device.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting. Oh, I like that.
I think I maybe did that quite well. But that's kind
analogy.
Of what I'm thinking currently in my brain.
And if you were if reincarnation does happen, if it's real, what would you like to come back as?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, I was thinking about this. I was driving, not that particular question, but I was just thinking, driving, it's, a bit mundane and it takes a while. I was thinking, why can't I fly? And so maybe an eagle.
Oh, nice one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just, swooping over things and getting all the best views, no traffic, that sort of thing.
Yeah, just riding on those kind of winds.
Yeah.
Lovely.
How about you?
Do you know a cat, I think?
Yeah, why a cat?
Because they're quite independent. They're quite funny. They seem to enjoy themselves a lot and play tricks. But I often like to curl up in the sun like a cat and nap.
Perfect. Oh, perfect. There's a pun. I didn't even realise. Sorry, I'm so bad. I've got such a terrible sense of humour. Okay, so bringing it back from the spooky side, was this always your dream career?
Yes. From a young age, actually. So when I was about 5 or 6. I found a dead body, but I didn't find him, and it wasn't an accidental find. There was one of our neighbours. He was an elderly gentleman, Bob, and he was a lovely guy, and we used to do little chores for him. We used to help him. We always chatted. He was a really lovely man. And myself and one of my friends, it was one winter, saw him shoveling down his driveway. It was really cold and he didn't look too well. Yeah. So we offered to do it for him. And we finished up and shovelled it and then knocked on the door, and the door kind of fell open and we didn't get any answer, so we were shouting. And then my nana's dog came running in and started barking and barking. So we kind of followed the dog, which felt awful because I never let myself into anyone's home. I was being taught to kind of knock and wait, and that, you know, the polite thing to do. But I don't know, something felt off. So even though I was really young, I could tell that something was not quite right. So I followed the dog in, and he looked, well, dead. And so I went and touched him, and he was cold. So I shouted to my friend to go and get help, and being the age I was, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I started pressing on his chest. You. It was really weird. Anyway, he died. He was there. He looked peaceful, and he was on the sofa with a fire going. But it was, I can still see it to this day. And that, I think, started my intrigue in dead bodies, and then seeing my granddad and recognising that, you know, it's just a shell. And then I worked in Quick Save. I used to work on the checkout as a young teenager, and it was across the road from Ralph's funeral service, and I kind of became a little obsessed with death, actually. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I was aware from a young age of probably some wrongdoings and injustices that had kind of gone on around me, and that really sparked something in me to want to fight justice and make sure bad things didn't happen in some way. And I remember being in science. I didn't know forensic science or investigation until I was a teenager, and I was in science in my first year of secondary school. And I had this amazing science teacher, and I remember her saying to me, "Have you ever thought about doing forensic science because you're really nosy?" Not really nosy. You never stop asking why. I always had questions.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. And she was saying it in a really positive light. And I thought, I don't know what that is. So I went away to the library. We didn't have computers in them days. Showing my age.
I remember the days.
Yeah. Popped to the library and started trying to figure out what forensic science was. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And I wanted to be a forensic biologist, I remember. But when I was about 16, I was really fortunate. My head of English, bizarrely English, not science, managed to help get me a work placement in Cleveland Police. He had a friend that worked there, and he knew that I was really passionate about this. So he got me a work placement, and I spent 2 weeks with them. And they took me down to the labs where the forensic biologists and the other forensic scientists were. And I got to explore the labs, and I got to explore the photography departments. And then I got to do a week out in the field with the crime scene investigators. And I just knew, this is it. I didn't want to be a forensic scientist anymore. I knew the lab wasn't right for me. I wanted to be out and about in the field, going from crime scene to crime scene, and working with different people. And never knowing what's going to happen, what's going to come next used to be a real buzz for me, because your day could change just in the blink of an eye. You could go from something that you would be thinking was quite mundane, and then you'd have a serious assault in, or murder, or a major investigation, or, you know, it was just, I loved that aspect of it. So I just knew from the age of about 16 that I wanted to be a crime scene investigator.
Amazing. And what an opportunity to have.
I was so lucky, because I probably would have pursued the route of forensic scientist, and I don't think it would have suited me, because I'm not really a lab-based girl, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's really interesting. And, you know, you mentioned death and that people just don't like to talk about it, but it's one of the certainties in this life. Do you fear your own death?
No, I don't fear dying. I think my fear is more around how I might die, rather than dying itself.
That makes sense.
Because I think it's just a natural progression. I watched a nurse who deals in end-of-life care, really. She does YouTube videos or TikTok. I can't remember where I saw it, but on one of these social channels. And I keep calling her the death nurse. I'm sure that's not her name. She works in hospice care, and she was talking about end of life. And she said something that really put put things into perspective for me. And I thought that, when you think of it like that, it's so smart. She said that when you're born, you don't know how to be born. You're just born into the world and your body is. And it grows and it takes you through each stage of your life. And when you get to death, in the same way that your body knew how to be born, your body knows how to die. And it's a process of it shutting down. And you just kind of live through that process until you take your last breath. Your body is doing what it's supposed to do effectively. And I thought, what a great way to look at it.
Absolutely.
A really great way to look at it. It really shifted things for me, actually.
It does. And, almost like it doesn't trust the conscious brain to do it, because with growing a baby, it's all subliminal. Not subliminal, it's your subconscious doing it. You don't have to think, right, today I'm going to grow its arms. Yeah. But because it doesn't trust you, because you'd probably forget, you'd get distracted by, I don't know, some chocolate or shiny light over there.
Make a cup of tea.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to grow that. So it's almost like just trusting your body to take.
It knows what it's supposed to do at each stage of its
really
life.
Interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah.
I mean, I still don't like talking about death. I still fear death, but it always happens, and I'm trying to talk about it more and more. But yeah,
I think it helps. But like I said, I think my biggest fear is of how I've never liked knives. I hate the thought of being cut, and being really sore.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Well, probably because you've seen so much of it.
Yeah, and that was probably one of the things that I used to struggle with. If people were alive, I used to struggle more. So if I could see the wound, I could never be a doctor or a nurse, because when I see the wound, I kind of feel it. I feel it in my stomach, and I'm like, I'm much better once people are dead, actually, which is probably a terrible thing to say, but that's the truth.
But you feel it for them almost if they're alive.
Exactly. So I wouldn't like to, big knife wound in any way, or I've never liked the idea of burning alive either.
No, I don't think many people do.
I want to be cremated, but I want it to happen after death.
Yeah, of course.
And then I used to be scared of drowning, but I heard that it's probably one of the most peaceful, cathartic
ways
to go.
Really?
Apparently,
what's the science behind
apparently
that?
You just kind of slip into unconsciousness, and it's a real kind of peaceful process. I mean, I still don't want to go that way or try it, but I think everybody's ideal would be to go quietly in the sleep.
I know,
that would be
nice
the
and
ideal.
Peacefully. But my mum said that the other day. Someone had died, and I was like, oh, how? You obviously asked that, and peacefully in the night. And I was like, but they live on their own. How do you know it was peaceful? You just presume that when you thought, it was peaceful. They might have been in purgatory for like 3 hours.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe it's just what we tell ourselves. Oh, it's peaceful in the night.
Well, it probably does give us comfort still, doesn't it? I've seen lots of violent ways to die, and that's not for me.
I don't think it's for anyone really. No. Not for me.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
I also think that I would take control of my own death. I believe in living wills and euthanasia. If I had a terminal illness or something was going really wrong, and I had a chance to choose, I would take that rather than kind of dragging out a severe illness.
I would. I mean, we don't put our animals through that, but we expect humans to go through it.
That's exactly
as well.
it.
Yeah. I wonder why it's taking so long, because it's legal in Switzerland, is it?
It is, yes.
And some people actually, there's tourism caused, going away to do it. I read an article once, and it was harrowing, but it was written by the wife or the partner of the man who decided to go through that process, and it even talked about how, when he took that drink and he asked for an extra hour before he took it, but then you couldn't ask for any more time. That was it. You had to make your mind up then. So it's just, again, it's not a nice process, but it must be so empowering as well at the same time, knowing that you're in control, you're not going to be suffering anymore, neither are people around you.
Exactly. Well, when people get so ill, they lose their dignity, they lose control over everything. The things that we kind of hold in our independence throughout our life, suddenly it gets taken away from us, and I don't think I'd ever want that.
No. Oh, interesting. So interesting. I could talk all the podcast about that, but let's move on a little bit. So you nearly didn't get the opportunity to do this role in the police. Can you explain why that was? Sorry to interrupt, but just a quick word about our sponsor, Be Daily. I've been subscribing to the Be Daily now since starting my business. It provides relevant and informative information directly to my inbox, not just about the North East, but also national news. If you're interested in subscribing, we'll put the link in the description box so you can get the business news directly to your inbox. Now back to the podcast.
Because I have a physical disability, I was born with it. I was born with something called Perthes disease. which means the blood flow doesn't get to your hip joints. I actually was born with clicky hips, and then I was placed into cast and then into splints. But my left hip went back into place. My right leg was a bit more tricky, and I had to have surgery to put it back into place. And then later on, they found out that I had Perthes disease, and it stops developmental growth of the hip effectively.
I've never heard of that before.
And the length. No, it's quite rare, and it's quite, particularly in females, it's quite rare. But it means that your leg doesn't grow at the same rate as your other one. So I had a 4 centimetre leg deficit, and I had really quite a bad limp. And the ball and joint don't grow properly, they don't fully form. And then as an adult, that translates into arthritis. When I was trying to get into the police to become a crime scene investigator, at the time it was a fully police role. So they were only letting police officers in. And, of course, to be a police officer, you used to have to pass the physical test.
Yeah.
And so they wouldn't take people on with disabilities like mine. Fortunately, it then became a civilian role. So I wasn't a police officer ever. I was known as a scientific support officer.
Okay.
And I worked within the scientific support department as a civilian for the police.
Right.
So I was not a police officer. So I was fortunate that they made it a civilian role, which then allowed me to apply and get that job.
Wonderful.
Had it stayed a police role, I probably would never have been able to do it.
Yeah. I mean, if it's me, I hate being told there's anything that I can't do. It makes me more determined. Was that the case for you?
Yes. I used to hate being told I couldn't do things, particularly where my leg was concerned. I never wanted to be put into a box. I never wanted to be called disabled or thought of disabled. Not because there's anything wrong with having a disability. I just didn't want other people to put me in a box and tell me what I couldn't do. And so doctors would say to me, you shouldn't necessarily do all the things that other kids do. Running's not so good for your hip. So, of course, I would run. I was rubbish at it.
Oh, bless you.
They'd say things like, don't jump particularly off heights. So I'd climb up onto roofs and jump down, and I'd climb trees and jump, and I'd go back jumping. All the normal things that kids would do. Mm-hmm. But I was getting told not to. And so I kind of went the other way and did it anyway, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know that's such a good thing these days. As an adult, reflecting. But I think I was probably just a kid trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was told not to horse ride ever. I did it once in Spain. It was beautiful. I ended up in a lot of pain. Probably won't ever do it again.
Yeah, it was probably for a reason you were told that. But I suppose I take it didn't hold you back at all in your career.
Mm-mm.
So, if it hadn't been switched to it's fine. If it hadn't been switched to a civilian role, just changing the title or the category, it could have stopped you doing a job that you were perfectly capable of doing.
Yes, which is a shame, really.
But it didn't.
But it didn't, thankfully, no. I don't think it's ever really stopped me doing anything that I've wanted it to do and I think it's because I am really determined and really persistent and really resilient. I've had to be, because it has had effects on me at different points in my life in different ways. So, yeah, in terms of my career, I did get the job that I wanted to do because of that civilian role. But there was still an impact in terms of the way that people looked at me and thought about me, and there was still some bullying. Like I've been bullied throughout my life as a result. And even in the workplace, I remember often police forces are broken down into area commands, and you get moved around area commands.
Right.
I started off in one that was not under great management. Then I moved to one I had the best manager I ever had. He was amazing. John Richards, he was fantastic. I still hold him in high regard to this day. Then I moved to another department where the management, again, was not so great. And before I moved over there, people were saying she should never have got the job because I was waiting for an operation. I was waiting for my hip to be replaced. So they were saying she should never have got the job. She shouldn't have been allowed to do the job. She's not capable of doing the job. And some of these people had never even met me yet. They had no idea of who I was or what I was capable of. But they already had that judgment based on the fact that I'd had a bit sick because things were going wrong with my hip and back, and I was waiting for a surgery, which is really disappointing. And then, my boss of the time, I think that he was doing his best to be disabled aware, but how people do things and say things is... Well, I like to think he was doing his best. that's the way that I prefer to look at it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
See the good in it. Because, you'd say things like, well, when you've had your surgery, you'll be able to reach points of entry much better. And then you'll just be like them and everybody else in there, so you'll be able to do a better job. And my response was always, but I'd do the same job as them. And if I can't reach a point of entry, mostly because I'm a short ass, not even because of a disability, then I would call somebody, I'd make contact, and I would ask for some kind of assistance. I would never not examine a point of entry just because it was too high, something like that. So, yeah, it was interesting. But, like you say, I got the job. I loved the job. It was a great experience.
Yeah.
And it didn't really affect me. That's more, I suppose, emotional and mental, and it is the job physically affecting me, not being able to physically do it because of it.
Yeah, and I guess it's just that label, isn't it? People put a label on something, they instantly have judgments about it, and a lot of them aren't true. It's all, I totally understand where you're coming from. I'm sure, hopefully, it was all coming from a good place, but maybe just ignorance, and sometimes because we don't talk about things like that, someone's, she's disabled. No, end the conversation, and sometimes maybe that's the right thing to do, but also having known some people in that situation, they sometimes want you to ask if, just care, and ask the questions, so then they can explain it. It removes all the barriers. And I don't know, how did you feel about that sort of thing?
If anybody asked me about because I think my limp was the most obvious thing. It was quite severe. So if anybody asked me, I'd always talk openly. But I never made a thing of it. It was other people that would make a thing of it.
Yeah.
I never thought of myself as disabled because I just got on with my life. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want to be stuck in a box. I didn't want a label putting on me in any way, to be honest with you. It's something that I've fought against a lot of my life. So I was always really open if anybody wanted to talk to me about it. And if anyone asked me about it, then I had no problems with that. It was talking behind your back or making jokes behind your back. That's when it becomes a problem for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's a different thing altogether, that.
There's that saying, I think it was the All Blacks, one of the rugby teams, they said, stab me in the front rather than stab me in the back, say what you have to say to me and then we can talk about it. Yeah. And it is, when it's done behind your back, that's a very cruel way.
Well, that move for me into that department, I already knew that people were talking to me and didn't think I was good enough or could do my job before I'd even got there. So I had to walk into a department, and it's difficult enough, I think, when you go in and you shift in and you're going into a new team and meeting new people to kind of integrate yourself anyway. And so I think that added pressure of walking in there knowing that they already don't think I'm good enough or capable, it just is an added stress. Absolutely. And an added pressure and an added kind of uncomfortability, really. Mm-hmm. But that just makes me kind of stick my head up and stick my chest out and walk in and think, let's do this.
More determined to succeed, which I think is brilliant. And you mentioned arthritis. So I take it you're still in a lot of pain day to day?
Yeah, so I have quite a bit going on. I had arthritis for a long time, and then my hip was so bad. What had happened, why I needed the surgery, was that I bent down one day to put some washing in, and I just couldn't get back up. And I had a loss of muscle mass around my lower back and hip. They always say to you to push your hip and get the most out of your own joint that you can. And I did that because there was a couple of times in my 20s when I'd gone for my annual checkups that they said maybe we should be thinking about surgery. And I was like, no, I'm managing the pain. I'm functional. Let's just keep going. And but when my back went on me, I'd lost a lot of muscle mass. And it was time for the surgery. I had very little ball or socket left.
How old were you when you had the hip
30.
replacement? Wow.
30. So I'd lived with a lot of pain, and that my limp had caused arthritis in my lower back as well. So I have arthritis in my back in a number of vertebrae, actually. And I also have arthritis in my knee joints. And it's a natural knock-on effect. Once you've got Perthes disease and it turns into arthritis, they expect you to have other physical kind of illnesses and issues as you get older and move through life. So it's not unexpected. And as I say, the limp caused a lot of issues. My surgery was to replace my hip, and my hip is great. My joint is great. But they extended my leg by 4 centimetres. They said that they could get me the 4 centimetre deficit, which for me, as a young woman, I was like, brilliant, do it, I'll be able to wear whatever shoes I want. I'll be able to go out dancing in heels. I won't be limping. It's the thing that's been the most obvious thing about me, I'd say, most of my life. So I was like, yeah, let's go for it. And they lengthened my leg. But that's had a big knock-on effect, actually. I don't think that I realised the impact of such a significant change in gait. I used to have the best balance, even though I had one leg shorter than the other. I had great core stability and great balance. Not anymore. My balance is rubbish, even though I'm like at equal leg length.
Just like 4 centimetres.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I've, of course, still got the arthritis. It was like learning to walk again because my gait had completely shifted, but it meant my whole body had shifted. So my alignment had shifted. And I was having issues not long after the surgery that when I walked very far or very fast, I was getting burning sensation in my calves and shins, like a burning and tingling sensation. And I went back to the surgeon and after my checkups, and he said that it would kind of go away and it's quite normal. But I was getting it bilaterally, which is quite unusual. I was feeling it in both legs. Yeah. So he couldn't understand why it was bilateral, but I was saying to him it is both legs. And I think it's that shift in alignment more than anything. And that pain never really subsided, and in fact it got worse. And I used to get a lot of cramp and then need my muscles massaging. And it gradually got worse and worse. And then a few years after the surgery, I was away with a friend one weekend and I turned to chuck my case in the car and my leg went into a real big spasm and flare-up. I couldn't put my leg down. It was the most severe searing pain that I'd felt. And I literally couldn't move. I almost passed out with it because it was so severe. And I thought, I've damaged my hip joint. I actually thought that I'd either dislocated my joint or cracked my fake joint, my porcelain hip. And I literally couldn't put my foot down, couldn't walk. We eventually got me to a seat and it kind of subsided. And then it didn't happen again for a couple of weeks, but then it did happen again. And then it's been ongoing for about 7 years. I had these flare-ups and some days they're really extreme and I may have 6 to 7 and sometimes they can last anything from a few minutes to an hour or more. And it is the worst pain. But thankfully, finally, after many trips to different surgeons, physiotherapists, osteopaths, you name it, I've tried it. I've found an osteopath down in London who is really amazing. And I think she's saying what the issue is because of that change in alignment, my muscles are going into spasm and my hip flexor's kind of turning in. It's trying to pull my leg back into the old position. Because for 30 years, I walked in a certain way, I stood in a certain way. And when they stretch your leg, they do it just by hand pulling the muscles and ligaments.
Oh, that sounds painful.
And of course, muscles stretch and contract, don't they? So they contract and they're trying to get back into kind of old positions and alignment. So it's actually muscle spasm that goes from my hip to my foot, but it's full leg.
I used to get bad cramps and that was painful enough just in my calves. I can't imagine the pain of that whole leg spasming.
The worst pain I've ever had, including after my hip surgery, any pain I'd had in my hip and back leading up to that, this has been the worst. It's been really challenging. But she is helping me and kind of manage me back into alignment. But it's had other knock-on effects. So the extreme pain events has triggered fibromyalgia. So now I have fibromyalgia as well. I still have arthritis in my other joints. And I'm also hypermobile. The hypermobility, thankfully, has helped in that my knee kind of moves out of alignment. A lot of this I was blaming on my knee. I thought that it was coming from my knee, not the muscles. And I was thinking there's something going on with my knee. But it wasn't. But my knee moves kind of out of joint and out of alignment. It shifts across. And she said that's actually a really good thing because I did not. If I was not hypermobile, my leg would have turned in by now and I would have a club foot.
Oh, goodness.
The hypermobility, even though it causes problems, it's actually been a blessing, a real blessing. So, yeah, it's it's challenging. And the pain has been, but this woman is amazing. Christina Lenz, she's called. I'd recommend it to anyone with any kind of back, joint mobility issues. She is a real blessing. She's a real blessing.
Because, I just had no idea that, you were in a world of pain, but you just kind of put on that brave face and get on with life.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people do, really, because I try not to. It's awful when we go to events. Dee, my business partner, she's amazing. She often tries to help. She often does a lot of the driving. She, bless her, do most of the heavy lifting, so I'm probably wearing Dee out. God love her. But so she's really great, but it's, we've been stood there delivering events, or I've been doing an event on my own, and I'll go into flare up, and it takes your breath away. And I'm trying to be professional and maintain a professional face and just talk, but I can't stand on my leg either. So I'm gripping onto something and trying to talk through it. It's sometimes awful.
Do you ever just say, "Oh, sorry, I've got a problem with my leg, it's just having a flare up"?
I've had to a couple of times. Yeah, I have had to a couple of times. I don't like to, because I don't know why it doesn't feel professional to me.
I don't know, though, but then people understand. They're just like, "Oh, that's why you stood on one leg." That's,
People do, and people are really kind. But yeah, I do try and deal with it in different ways and manage it.
So having been through a lot of the situations you have, what are some of the life lessons that you've learned?
That's a really good question. I think that I wish that I'd known from a younger age that our minds, our brains are the greatest tool, and we can choose. We can choose how we react to things and how we deal with things. I'm quite an emotional person, so I react sometimes quite emotionally. As I'm getting older and I'm working more on myself, I think I'm getting much better control over that, and I choose a lot of my reactions, and I choose what I give power over me. I think that's if we could teach that in schools, I think the world would be a better place, to be honest with you.
Oh, I agree. I wish I'd known more about that as well. It's just so powerful. Even just that one thing you mentioned alone, you can't often choose what's going to happen to you, but you can control how you react.
Yeah, and with my pain and the pain events, I've been on a lot of medication for years, and I ended up really ill. I had severe anemia, and they thought they were going to have to take me in for a blood transfusion. And it was a stomach bleed caused by all the medication. So I don't take anything now. I occasionally do if I really need to, if I'm really suffering, but I choose to do it through breathing and stretching and massaging and try to manage it in a different way. And if I go into flare up, I literally try and breathe through it and kind of meditate through it, and it's made a difference. Because I used to get, I think the automatic response is to become tense and hold yourself differently. But what I realise is that's not having a great effect on the rest of my body. That then affects you all the way down.
I'm terrible for that. Even now, I am, I'm on guard, asking questions and everything, but even if I'm sat watching TV on a night, I'm just like this. And Chris is like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Oh, nothing." And I was like, "Oh, okay, try and relax."
Me too. One of the things that I've noticed is that I hold a lot in my jaw.
Me too.
So I try to deliberately, drop my jaw and slacken it. Sometimes I look a bit gormless, but actually, when I do it, I find that I become more peaceful and a bit more relaxed.
Yeah, I've got big muscles here just from where I'm constantly clenching it. And someone told me, if you haven't got a pen lid right now, if you put a pen lid in between your mouth and bite down on that, it kind of gives you that space between it and relaxes it a little bit there as well.
Idea.
But yeah, again, driving often, I'll find myself, I'm like, my jaw's just
clenching.
Yeah,
it's really bad for you, isn't it?
I know. Yeah, I need to be better at just relaxing, going with
breathing.
Posture. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of alternative therapies that we should try first. Actually, I think it was the Huberman Labs podcast as well, kind of neuroscience and biology. He said, what was it? The first place he always goes to, I think, was it alternative therapy? No, first place is he checks his diet. Is he eating the right things? And he checks supplementation. And then I think it was alternative therapies. I might be getting the order slightly wrong. And then it was medical. So it was always going through that checklist first, just to rule out anything obvious that we often don't do.
What a great idea. I might start doing that myself, actually. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Maybe I haven't got that exactly right, that quote, but it's something along those lines.
I'll look it up.
I think it's the Huberman Lab. It's a fantastic podcast.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that.
Improves kind of health and thinking, mindset and everything like that.
I think that the power of the mind, like I say, we should got it, but also to have a bit more confidence. I wish you could find confidence at a young age and not wait until you're getting much older. I still get nervous about things. My confidence is still not where I would like it to be. It's something I work on. So within that, I think pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. When you feel fear or you don't feel confident, just do it anyway.
Yeah,
do it. Because I think that's where the real growth is, isn't it?
Absolutely. We've had other guests saying that. And you think, even like, I don't know, really successful business people, successful in whatever career, whatever sport, you think, it just comes naturally for them. But you don't realise that actually they push through the fear and that's how they've got to where they are. It's not about letting it control you or being a barrier.
Definitely. I would agree with it. And I think the other two really big ones for me is to be more vulnerable and also ask for help. This is a new one that's come to me. And people around me have been saying, I don't ask for help or I don't accept help very easily. And I see that and I don't. And for me, I think it's because I've always saw it as me being independent, seeing it as empowering, being able to take care of myself. No, I don't need any help. But what I'm learning in recent months, actually, is that you're taking away a gift from the people around you that care about you and love you. Because when you ask them for help, they feel needed, they feel valued, and you're vulnerable with them. And I think that's really important for building relationships. I listened to a podcast with a guy called, have you heard Simon Sinek?
Yes.
I love
Big
Simon
fan.
Sinek. Yeah, me too. And he was saying that he will always ask for help in his relationships and his friends will do the same. And it's something he kind of demands because of how it helps build relationships. And that was really interesting. But actually, there's been a couple of things that have happened to me recently and with the people around me where I realised I've been refusing help. I've not really been listening. And actually, I think that in asking for help and being vulnerable is a really powerful thing.
I agree. And it's a lovely way of you putting it, like it does give other people joy to help someone, especially if they care about them.
Definitely.
So, yeah, I need to be better at that as well.
It's if you think about when somebody asks you for help and if you can, you automatically do it. And then you feel good because you've been able to help somebody that you care about.
Yeah.
So then why would you take that to enjoy away from somebody else?
Yeah, totally reframing it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And the last question before we go into the regular feature is, what's the best advice anyone has ever given you?
That's a good one. Does it have to be one?
No.
Okay, when I was really young, my dad used to say to me, people are people the world over. You treat everybody the same. Whoever you meet, they're just people, and that's how you treat them. And then at school, another really important one for me came from a teacher, which was to always treat people in the way that you want to be treated. I love that one. I think quite a few people might get that from school.
Yes. Yeah, good school value, isn't it?
Definitely. And again, most recently, the best bit of advice I've been given, actually the biggest, I think that's had an impact on me so far, is to negotiate with myself.
Okay.
Which might sound a bit weird, but I'm my own worst critic. I'm really hard on myself. I often have imposter syndrome. And then sometimes it means that I procrastinate and I don't move forward, or I beat myself up for the things that I haven't done rather than looking at what I have done. And it's quite a lot of negative self-talk. I'm trying to do things differently. I'm trying to change that and turn things into more positive self-talk and try to recognise the things I've done. But a woman that I'm seeing for alternative therapy, I'd probably call it, said to me, negotiate with yourself. You work for yourself for a reason, because it gives you time and it gives you freedom. So negotiate and say, if I achieve these objectives, then it's okay if I do something nice for myself for an hour.
Yeah.
I have problem that my hip, I suppose, that I've just been telling you about. Walking's really difficult for me and I'm in a lot of pain, but walking on the beach seems to help. So I was beating myself up and stopping myself from doing it because I knew I'd be in pain by the time I walked from home to the beach. I'd be in pain before I got there, and then I wouldn't enjoy it and, not be in a great mood. So she said, why don't you drive to the beach?
Yeah.
And I said, I can't do that. That's lazy. It's inappropriate. It's a waste of fuel, you know. And I had all these responses, and she said, you taking away that part of your brain will always try and keep you in comfort. Your brain will stop you from moving forward, from going to the beach, because it's like, no, you're going to end up in pain. Rewire it, move it, drive to the beach, have your beach walk and enjoy it. And I thought, do you know what? And lo and behold, I've been negotiating with myself on all sorts of different things, and it's really helping me. It's had a significant impact.
Amazing, and so simple as
so
well.
simple, it's crazy. Even the small things, making decisions about, I don't know, going out for dinner or what I eat, or going for a beach walk, or rewarding myself after work. It's recognising that, you know, I think that I'm worth it, and I deserve nice things. It's not all just work, and then
almost answering back to that negative voice in your mind. You say, actually, no. How about we do this? And
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's worked really well for me. I love it. I mean, I am negotiating almost everything, but
well, good.
But why not?
Absolutely, I'm going to start negotiating with that negative voice in my head sometimes.
Yeah, it's really good.
Or maybe not even negotiating, just saying, shut up.
Yeah, shut it up.
Brilliant. Part of the podcast where we go through the regular 10 questions, where we ask on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, how you would rate yourself at the following things.
Okay.
Number 1, how good looking are you?
5.
5, okay. How funny are you?
10.
Awesome.
I think so.
That's what matters. How good at cooking are you?
Oh, it depends on the day, really. Sometimes I really enjoy it, sometimes not so much. So I'd probably go 5 in the middle as well. Some days it's brilliant, some days it's awful. So probably in the middle.
How good at singing are you?
I think 11, but everyone else around me, minus. I'm an awful singer. I love singing, but I'm awful. So 0. Definitely 0.
As long as you enjoy
Tone
it.
deaf. Well, that's what I say.
How about drinking alcohol and your tolerance to alcohol?
Too good, I think, sometimes. I have actually started being more mindful about that, and I'm choosing when I drink and how much I drink. But over my lifetime, I've been great at drinking alcohol. I used to work in pub management.
Oh, okay.
So I was really good at that.
Occupational hazard.
Yeah. 8, I'd go 8.
Very good. Parenting skills. If you're not a parent to any children, parent to any animals?
I did have a pet. I'm very caring in my nature, I think. I'm good at taking care of people, but I don't have kids. I think that comes back to my hip as well, because I was told that I probably wouldn't be able to have them. And also that I wouldn't be able to carry full term, and it would be really painful, and there may be complications. So I just kind of knocked that thought on the head, to be honest. And I think also I'm a bit selfish. I like to travel. I do like a drink.
Yeah, fair enough.
Ties and binds, so...
I love my kids, but they are a bit tired.
Yeah. So, but I have got nieces and nephews who I love a lot, and
that's best of both worlds.
So probably 5, somewhere in the middle again, I guess.
Fab. How good a friend are you?
I'd like to think a good friend. I'd like to say at least an 8. I'd do my best. We don't always get it right, do we? But
no.
I like to think I'm a good friend.
Excellent. How intelligent are you?
Oh, that's a difficult one, that. This is the thing with me with imposter syndrome. I've always thought that I was really thick. For a lot of years, I thought that I was really stupid. I don't know why. I think it's certain things that have happened throughout my childhood and then schooling years. Even though I was in the fast-moving group at school, so I was a year ahead, I still didn't feel smart enough. But the older I've got, the more I realise that actually I am quite smart. I have quite a lot of smarts about me. So, you know what? I'm going to give myself an 8.
Good.
Yeah, I'm going to go with 8.
I always say it's a bit of a trick question because there's so many different aspects to intelligence.
Yes.
There's some things that I'm incredibly thick at, and then there's some things that I do quite well. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Like everyone, I think. You've got your strengths and weaknesses. How kind are you?
Yeah, I'd say 8 or 9 for that. I am really kind, actually.
Oh, lovely. And the final question, how good at sex are you?
10. Does anybody ever say less than 10 at that?
I don't know. I can't remember, to be fair. Some people say, oh, yeah, I'm really good in bed. I go to sleep as soon as the lights turned out. We've had that sort of answer. Someone didn't want to talk about it, fair enough. One person really wanted to talk about it. It's like, why shouldn't you talk about it? It's an important part of life. You know, we wouldn't be here without it.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, it's one of those things where there's a stigma attached to it.
There is.
But yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, it's Ryan from Harvey Hugo and I am a videographer. So, are you looking for a new way to stand out in today's crowded digital landscape? Well, look no further than podcasting. Here at Harvey and Hugo, we specialise in creating and producing high quality podcasts that engage and inspire audiences. And with our comprehensive production services, we'll take care of all the technical details, from the recording and the editing to the distribution and the promotion. With millions of listeners tuning in every day, it's the perfect time to start connecting with them on a deeper level. Let Harvey and Hugo help you unlock the power of podcasting and take your message to the next level.